So I wrote a book called Race, A History Beyond Black and White. And this is a history of the idea of race. It's a history of racial prejudice, and a history of prejudice, and how the contention of the book is that human beings are prejudiced, but that the form in which prejudice is addressed, whether it's defined by religion, or whether it's defined by nation, or whether it's defined by this extremely modern concept called race, depends on the time period. And it is a book that is personal as well as historical in two ways. It's personal in that it begins with an incident in our local town where I was standing on line at the swimming pool and a group of sort of 12, 13-year-old young black males was accused of stealing some money. And I immediately knew they were guilty. And I knew they were guilty even though I had no evidence that there was a crime or that any of them did it. I just felt this certainty. And I asked myself, why? Why have I, what could be so what could have such an effect on me that I could make this judgment with no evidence? And then the second place the book becomes personal is when I came to write about the Holocaust. I stopped the writing. And I stopped and I said that I'm talking about all this, but me personally, emotionally, I do not forgive the Germans. I can't. And I said that that awareness of bitterness makes me aware of what some African Americans or Palestinians might feel towards me. And it is those two parts of the book on race, well, those two plus one other, that have caused the most effect on kids. Some intensely disagreeing with me, saying, how can you write this book if you're prejudiced? Or saying that, how can you, they identify with modern German kids, and they're saying, how can you blame a kid like me who wasn't alive, wasn't close to being alive, for something that happened in their great-grandparents' generation, if not earlier. And although the kids I've found who tend to most identify with my writing that are African American kids, in whose family there may be an ongoing voice of bitterness. And I think one of the things that I so loved about Obama's race speech when he was running for president the first time was he talked about bitterness. And I think bitterness is something that exists within families and isn't dealt with, is not shared publicly. And so I think this emerges when I talk about that. The other thing in that book that's proven controversial in the most wonderful ways is that in talking about the history of prejudice, before we get to race, I talk about religious prejudice in some depth. And people who've been very disturbed by that are devout kids. Kids who are devoutly Lutheran or Mormon or Catholic, who interpret it as if I'm attacking their faith. And I have found them to be my best readers, because when they realize that I'm not upset, I understand that they feel that way, I show why I think that, and that in talking about Luther's anti-Semitism, for example, I am not critiquing Lutheranism. It is so important for those young people to reconcile what they're reading with their faith that they become very, very intent and serious readers. And so that is a book which definitely stirs the pot and upsets some readers, and that is okay, as long as what I say is, let's talk.